Optimism. So we'll make a quick intro to Optimism, one of the most used layer 2 solutions for Ethereum, and at the moment for Ethereum, but it could be used for other blockchains as well. So why do we need this kind of so-called layer 2s, and what is the whole idea? So Optimism in our case is called that way because it is using optimistic rollups. Uh, it is basically a way to scale layer 1 blockchain. The whole idea is that you are accepting some, let's say, transactions and blocks for valid, and after that you are validating if your assumption is correct. And this algorithm can lead to incredible speed and scalability on uh, on the layer 1 blockchain that we're using. You can see that on the picture there is drawn Optimism and Ethereum, and in that case I'm not sure if you're aware, but this is the Ethereum logo. And what is Optimism? Simply said, without the complication, it is a fast, stable, and scalable layer 2 solution built for Ethereum by other Ethereum developers. And Ethereum on the other side is maybe the most used smart contract platform and blockchain nowadays. The problem with Ethereum on layer 1 is that the transactions are super expensive and they are much slower than they could be on this layer 2s, and in this case on Optimism. Um, Optimism is also trying to build the so-called super chains. So the idea of the super chains is that you can build multiple Optimism chains on top of Ethereum using the Optimism bridge. And if these chains are following common like protocol and they can communicate with each other, even though that they're autonomous chains, they're still part of something bigger, which we will call for this lecture a super chain. So super chain is a set of optimism chains that are communicating with Ethereum over the optimism bridge. We need multiple chains because they can have different, let's say, like special properties. Some of them could be built for some financial operations, other could be built for some social network and so on. And after that, they should share this common interface so they can be governed by the Optimism Collective. And Optimism Collective is a kind of decentralized autonomous organization. You can think of a decentralized council, which is voting and that way controlling and taking decision for the Optimism network and the Optimism superchain. We will go quickly throughout the design philosophy of um, of optimism because it's important in order to get the whole point and why it was built the way it was built. So there are a few main properties that are important for the optimism project and optimism community. It is that you have to keep everything simple. It should be pragmatic, it should be sustainable, and it should be optimistic. So let's go through all of them step by step. What simplicity means? It means that we have multiple parts inside of optimism, but the idea is to keep all of them simple, auditable, and to be easy to understand what's happening behind the scenes. This is not important only for for optimism, but in general, it is important for programming. It is a good programming practice. You should keep all the different components simple, and it should be able to, it should be easy to maintain them, and basically checking what's happening with the different parts. Pragmatism, yeah, this is something super important because usually in blockchain it is a highly practical but also theoretical space where people can, and developers and researchers get into the rabbit hole trap, and they can continue researching and trying to re-optimize, super optimize, do some things that will be super useful in the future, and yeah, do a lot of research without producing any practical code. But the main philosophy of optimism is that it should be pragmatic. It means that yes, we can do our research, we can think about the future and so on. But before that, uh, optimism is trying to check what is important for the developers, what do they need, what is important for the business and the users, and how optimism can deliver it as fast as possible. So this is also part of their philosophy. Sustainability. Yeah, whatever optimism is building, they are trying to make it sustainable long term. And yeah, you should be pragmatic and deliver what is needed when it's needed, but at the same time, you shouldn't use some shortcuts and just deliver some dirty code. So it should be some balance between pragmatism and sustainability. And also the other strategy that Optimism is doing is they're trying to reuse everything that is already on the Ethereum blockchain and is battle tested. So Optimism is a second layer solution, which is more scalable and uses optimistic rollups, but at the same time, it is CVM compatible, so all the software that is running on top of Ethereum can be reused here. So yeah, I think this is a very smart idea to reuse the things that are already working. Optimism, it's yeah, more like an idea that you should be optimistic for the future and optimistic for Ethereum. Basically, the main goal of optimism is to build software that is in that could be in favor for the Ethereum developers, for the Ethereum community. So they are optimistic about Ethereum, their layer one, the layer one that they're building on, and yeah, they're trying to build and deliver the best project, um, which could be of use for the developers. What are the design principles for optimism? They are useful. You can see that US and T are capitalized because the main things are, as you can see in the next slide, utility. It means that Optimism blockchain is trying to build something that is really used by its users. So it's important what is the utility. It's important to build apps and apps that are in fact used and that people can benefit from. The other principle is for S, that stands for S is simplicity. It's similar to the design architecture. The principle is keep everything simple, reuse as much as you can from battle-tested software that was used in Ethereum and other EVM chains. And through all simplicities, you can scale and add more and more features to the blockchain. For E stands extensibility. It means that it is important to build simple, solid modules, but it is also important to have a strategy how to extend them later on, and basically how you can structure your whole project and architecture and modules in order to be easy to build on top of them. This is an important part. It is related to what are the main components in the Optimism stack. As you can see, it is separated in layers, like any other big project and protocol. It's important to keep things in different layers in order to be easily understandable. So you can see in the diagram that the circle things are things that are proposed. Maybe they are still not implemented, but they are about to be implemented. And the other things that are not circled are already in the ecosystem up and running. So there are a few layers. Maybe the most important is the data availability layer. This is the layer one that is used as a checkpoint, and it stores like the main state. In the case of Optimism, it is Ethereum, but it is flexible enough so it could be some other layer one in the future. There is a sequencing layer. You can see it here. So the idea of the sequencing layer is to prepare the transactions on layer 2 that should be published on layer 1 and do some, let's say, preparation and serialization for them. We have derivation layer, which consists of rollup and indexer. So this layer is basically fetching some data from the data availability layer and also from the current state of the Optimism stack, and yeah, prepares the raw data for the transactions. We have the execution layer, which is EVM compatible. It is like, yeah, you can build some smart contracts here and send transactions, and after that they're prepared and then settled on the data layer. We have the settlement layer, which is important for the consensus. For example, if you prepare some transactions and you want to publish them on the data layer, before that they should be validated on the settlement layer. And there is also governance layer, which is controlling the whole protocol. So if you want to introduce a new feature or there is some very intense dispute raised or something like that, different parties that own the Optimism token can take part in the governance, and if they have enough tokens, they can execute their governance power and yeah, basically set the path for the protocol, how it works and what will be the direction in the future. So going throughout the different layers one by one, um, the first thing that we're going to go through is the data availability layer. Uh, it is a layer where the raw inputs are stored and published. So Optimism is trying to build their tools for optimism, and everything is built in order to empower the Ethereum community and ecosystem. So it's a logical thing that Optimism Stack has decided that their data layer is Ethereum. So the whole idea is that you can have multiple transactions and state transitions happening on Optimism, and yeah, only from time to time on some of the important uh, like steps, you have to add some, let's say, information and milestones on top of Ethereum, and that way you can optimize on price, cost, and performance. Sequencing. Uh, Sequencing layer determines how the transactions on Optimism stack chain are collected and published to the availability layer module. At the moment, there is one sequencer in Optimism, but in the future, they're planning to add multiple sequencers and to optimize it. And yeah, simply said, the whole idea of the sequencing is basically aggregating all the transactions that are happening on Optimism, and then using some specific format and publishing them on the data availability layer. There is derivation layer, which communicates with the data availability layer and basically uses some data from the data availability layer and also uses some data from the execution layer. Yeah, it also uses the current state of the optimism network, and it's basically like a connection between the different layers. Inside the derivation layer, there are two important modules. The rollup module that has some engine API that receives input from the Ethereum blockchain data, basically a data layer. And it also uses some information from the sequencer transaction batches. And it tracks the deposit transaction events and I guess the withdrawal transaction events. So as you saw in the initial diagram, there is a bridge which is connecting Ethereum and Optimism. So this bridge is super important. Using this bridge, you can basically deposit Ethereum here, and then you can receive it on some of the Optimism chains. And after that, you can move your Ethereum from the Optimism chain back to the Ethereum chain, the data layer. So all of this is handled by the rollup layer, the derivation layer, and the rollup module. There is also an indexer module, which is still under development, and the idea of this module is to index some data from the data layer and emit events that can be used on the Optimism in the Optimism blockchain. We have execution layer. The idea of this layer is basically to track against some events, but also it's also to create their own blockchain. So on execution layer, you can deposit smart contracts on top of Optimism. You can create transactions. You can do everything that you can do on the data layer, but it's in fact in this second layer blockchain. So it is much more faster, cheaper, scalable, and at the same time, it it stores the data in its own state and inside the Optimism network. Yeah, here it is. It is the EVM module, which I explain what it can do. It can create smart contracts and it could create transactions and so on. So it is fully compatible, almost fully compatible with Ethereum. So most of the tools that you can use on the Ethereum blockchain, you can use here. For example, you can connect your wallet to the Optimism stack because it supports the EVM layer module and the same way that you're doing it with Ethereum. There is a settlement layer, which is also important. It is used to allow external blockchains to establish to get a view of the state of the Optimism stack chain. And for example, we can have multiple Optimism chains that want to get some information and they can use the Optimism chain for settlement layer. The settlement layer also has some validation algorithms. So for example, if there is some transaction that should be included in the Optimism chain, it should be some kind of attestation-based fault proof, which means that there is automatic checks, but if there is some dispute, there is some multi-signature control wallet that can go and check the dispute and validate if the proof is correct or not. So this is how the Optimism attestation-based fault proof works at the moment. There is another proposal which is still not included, but it is called fault-proof optimistic settlement. The idea is the same as the attestation-based fault-proof, but it should be more permissionless. So everyone can submit such kind of proof and challenge the current state of the optimistic chain. And it is not at the moment it is allowed only for this multi-sig challenger. But the idea is that everyone should be able to raise a dispute and challenge some of the states if he thinks that something is incorrect. And there is also a validity proof settlement, which is based on some mathematical proofs, and it will require that every time when you create a transaction or I don't know, create a smart contract, you also have to deposit or broadcast a proof that can guarantee that your transaction is correct. About the governance layer, as we discussed, this is a super important layer in Optimism. It is uh, basically part of the Optimism collective. So the idea of the governance is that everyone who has Optimism tokens can go and vote how the network should behave, what are the next important features that should be included, how the funds that the protocol is owning should be spent. And yeah, basically it is acting as a super complex decentralized autonomous organization, and it is in the core of the Optimism protocol. There is multi-sig contracts that have some voting power, and there is also, as I mentioned, the governance token, which is the Optimism token, that could be used if you want to exercise your voting rights and vote on some community proposal. Overall, this is how Optimism works. And if we have to summarize it, um, it is a second layer solution that is built on top of Ethereum, which is its data layer. And rather than doing everything on Ethereum and trying to overwhelm the layer one solution with a lot of transactions, you can use the second layer solution, make a lot of transactions there, and only from time to time settle the information on the base layer. That way you can achieve a huge scalability upside. Transactions are much faster, and last but not least, it is not overwhelming the layer one. So if you have any questions, you can ask now. I'm not sure if this thing about the second layer solution was clear or not. If it's not, we can discuss it now. You can raise your questions. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, I think that there is some similar things. For example, in Polkadot, you also have some SWOTs. So the community is voting on different proposals, and they can basically decide how the network should behave, what will be the next features, what will be the projects that the community is investing in. So in that manner, it is similar. Um, yeah, Polkadot is also trying to be something like a scalability solution on top of Ethereum, but they have also their own like layer one blockchain. So I wouldn't say that it's typical layer two and it is based on optimistic rollups. So there are some common things, but I think that optimism is much more scalable and much more, yeah, clear and classical layer 2 solution. Yeah, welcome. Some other questions?